Hello, hello, global friends. How are you? I hope everybody's doing fantastic this Saturday morning and able to join us for a kickoff of this season of Leadership Roundtable discussion. And I'm super, super jazzed to have with me my co-host that I really like for him to introduce himself. So Joe, please tell our audience a little bit about who you are and what are you up to this morning.
Thanks, Izabela. I am Joe Serio. I'm a trainer and author. I train on leadership, resilience, and organizational development. I work primarily with government organizations for the past 10 years in helping them transform their lives to show up to work differently, better, to get what they want out of life. I spent about 10 years in the former Soviet Union. I worked with the Soviet National Police in the Organized Crime Control Department and spent about a year in China prior to the big changes in the late 80s and early 90s. We'll talk about more and more as we go on, but there's a lot to unpack. I'm thrilled to be here and great to be part of this program.
That is fantastic, Joe. It's absolutely great to have you. And we're also having our great friend here joining us that I'm super always glad to see her face and her attitude. Hi, Liga. How are you doing? I'm so glad you were able to be with us this morning. And of course, participation, questions, anything you'd like to share, we'd love to also have you included in our discussion. Your background, Liga, as also educator and someone who is traveling the world, who is greeting us from Costa Rica, yes. It's always great to have a friend on global scale having these discussions. And one of the reasons what Joe just mentioned here, how important it is to really understand why we're doing, right? Joe's background complements so much with mine because of global scale and global trends and things that are changing. We wanted to really see what is happening, how is those implications are having impact on our domestic landscape, as well as ripple effect on the global landscape. And Joe, you mentioned something, obviously, China, Russia, backgrounds in being in a very, very specific space around intelligence, right? And what do you see happening right now in terms of the trends? What is shifting? What is changing? Why, from your perspective, is the reason why? And I cannot wait to share mine.
One of the biggest trends is, it doesn't feel like a trend, but this is what's happening. A deep-seated cynicism that's having a huge impact on leadership and the failure of leadership almost across the board. So if you see the trend right now toward increased violence, increased instability, increased uncertainty, together with the rise in prices and all the dynamics we've been seeing, what we see is the failure of leadership to step up and actually lead, which is one of the reasons why, as we find ourselves in the middle of this Ukrainian war, that Zelensky rises to the top as a figure that's easily noticeable. Why? Partly because of the dynamics he's in the middle of, and partly because it's so rare these days for us to point to somebody and say, that is an absolutely incredible, people-driven, integrity-based leader. And unfortunately, I think that's part of the foundation of all the other trends that we're seeing.
I love that you hit a nail on the head right away. And I also love that Tim is with us from New York, fellow New Yorker. Tim, Joe is originally from New York, so it's always great to see people join us from parts of the world that we cherish and love so much. And thank you so much for your interest. We cannot wait to hear your thoughts and comments as well, so please feel free to share them. Brett, I just want to say, I don't want to ignore you, my friend. Great to have you with us. I also someone who has a phenomenal global background and actually spent tons of times in Asia. So your and Joe's background with China will be close to home for sure. Akil, great to see you as well. So you guys had a chance to hear a little bit of just opening this lid of Pandora box, right? And one of the interesting things, I can agree with you, everything that we're seeing is happening due to either lack of right leadership or in fact ineffective leadership. And I know that people are tired hearing this, like, you're beating those leaders. over and over and over. But reality is, if we're having people in positions that cannot lead and they're not effective, we have two choices: either step up or step down. And unfortunately, we're not seeing either of those things happening. And that's why we're seeing numerous fiascos simultaneously. And who is having the most effect by it? Where is that ripple effect? And how is it affecting? We're seeing some systematic issues coming to the light, right? We're seeing so many unresolved issues in our own turf. So do you mind sharing a little bit what you see also from your perspective?
Yeah,
Yes.
one of the biggest issues in that framework is not only leadership at the top that is insufficient. What I see in the workshops that I run across the country is that mid-level and frontline employees have relatively no concept of what it means to be a leader, what it takes to be a leader, and there's an absolute fear of actually stepping into that role. Partly because they don't know what it means, they don't know what it entails. Partly because organizations are doing a horrible job at training people to move up the ladder for whatever reason. Whether they're overwhelmed with work, short of budget, whatever, it's not actually, they're not reasons, they're excuses. And what we end up seeing is we push frontline to be a supervisor. One day they're frontline and say, okay, you've been here for X number of years, tomorrow you're supervisor, good luck, and they push them off into the mean, cruel world, right? Yeah. These people have no idea what to do even with their friends. I was hanging out with these people drinking at the bar yesterday, and today I'm their boss. How do I even handle this? And unfortunately, in a lot of organizations, that is perpetuated so that the supervisor is now kicked up to manager, and they may get a day, they may get even a week-long conference. That is not going to cut it, because leadership comes from the inside out. And there's only so many leadership conferences we can go to and hear, what are the values of good leaders? What are the attributes of good leaders? That's important, but it's secondary to figuring out what are your attributes and what are your traits and what's standing in the way inside your head that's keeping you from being a great leader.
Oh my goodness. I love where you're going with this, Joe. And we have to really literally address an elephant in the room, as Ivan and Chris already knows from previous conversations, how essential that is. And we really wanted to give you a global perspective. I know we speak to all of you, to all of your pain points. And question is always, what is the solution and how do we really look at? So we wanted to take a little bit of a journey. Think about it, an elevator ride. You're going all the way to the top floor of this amazing skyscraper with insane view of the city and different perspective, and all the way down to -4th or 5th floor in garage and anywhere in between. In order to really contribute individually by choice, because we want to step up not only with more responsibility, but to really model the way. We really are missing to highlight what are the great role models to model after, right? You mentioned, sir, earlier, Zelensky. You mentioned in Secret Sauce, and we will depict a little bit more of that in a bit. But also, we're sharing something that I really feel like people forget. What is the power within us? To ask for more, to seek specifics, and to take our reins and control of our own, whatever might be situation, scenario, and what we are missing, what we're lacking, what we are asking. And if that is not met, what we can then do, how can we meet those needs if they're not met in our organizations that we're part
of? I think leadership is a spiritual and philosophical exercise. In order, let's put it this way, the idea is one of freedom. And what you're talking about in terms of development of leadership, you have to find your voice. Yes. You have to find your voice. If you can't find your voice, if you don't know what you stand for, if you don't know what your values are, if you can't answer the questions, who am I? What do I want? How am I going to get it? What's the vision that we're setting out together to go to? So what's your default position? Your default position might be envy, embarrassment, blame, petty behavior. Without finding your voice and being able to stand solidly on your own 2 feet, and then to inspire and enlist other people to go with you for their benefit, not for my benefit, for
Yes.
their benefit.
Yes.
That collectively, we can create an organization that is unstoppable. In all the organizations that I work with, the amount of cynicism, the amount of pessimism, the amount of toxic politics is needed, right? But toxic politics is something that just absolutely destroys organizations. And so the leadership at the top is giving the lower levels no reason to step up. They've already beaten the life out of them. And we're getting what we get. We can see the results.
I love what you also where you're going, and wanted to also give a little bit additional perspective to complement what Joe just shared. In addition, what others are mentioning here, and Dal is with us, which is fantastic. Todd is with us, and gentlemen and ladies, please feel free to ask questions, comment, share your perspective, because this is a learning opportunity that we do together. And then one of the reasons why we're also putting this, our intelligence, our compound knowledge and resources, so we can really also come up with transformative, innovative solutions. So we're not just restructuring, reapplying same old, because old container, old structure, as we know, never works, right? So it's a huge and great opportunity to really do on that. In addition, what we have a great opportunity is to really build a relationship with upper top echelon, even though they may not have leadership skills, but if they have authority to make a decision, at least make clear what is going on and make intention known. And honestly, what Joe just said, where he sits and where he does a lot of trainings and where I sit, we see then 360 overview and perspective. Who is involved? How is decision being made or not? Who is checking off the boxes and demands of what we did prior years and why and how? Who is really thinking deeper and bigger? Who is aware of the changes not only within organizations, but also in the industry, right? We can't say that a single industry will not affected during the COVID, and some were horribly badly affected more than the others. But did we position properly for that? That is the big questions, right? So we have us here great comments from Brett. Of course, Brett, 2 years actually, that yes, managers promoting to the leaders and middle managers are that have to be around long time, that resist change. And you're spot on, because they're so comfortable to mundane and status quo. And status quo even 10, 15 years ago was not good enough, let alone right now in a volatile time. And just by opportunity to have a job and showing up and clock in, clock out, the mindset, it's a toxic killer of that individual, but that also team and everybody around. That creates toxic culture on steroids that is affecting well-being of everyone. And we're seeing an aftermath of issues and symptoms that we're experiencing right now with our colleagues, with environments we never thought we're going to see, Joe, right? Ranging from mental health to suicide to domestic violence, substance abuse, because people cannot anymore deal with magnitude of issues they're facing without knowing what the healthy way is there or what support exists and how.
Yeah,
so we have a question here for Sandeep for you, Joe. So if you don't mind, please reacting what he just shared. Thank you, Sandeep. That is very, very powerful comment, observation. And please, Joe, comment.
Actually, what I would like to do is link Sandeep's comment with Brett's comment.
Fantastic.
Because what we see is resistance to change, and we see it all the time. And
Yes.
part of the issue is that people haven't dealt with self-leadership. They don't know why they're there anymore, and they haven't decided, like we were saying earlier, things like their values, and they're retired on the job. Everyone I know knows that. Everyone I talk to in my workshop, they know their number. And people tell me, they say, yes, 9 years, 4 months, and 3 days. Everybody knows what number that is. the number of time, days, years that I have to sit through this and suffer through this until I get to retirement. That is a horrible number to know. And in fact, as a quick aside, I had some people in a workshop who said, that's exactly the wrong number. The number that we pay attention to is how many dollars do I need in order to retire in the way that I want to retire, to have the kind of life that I want to retire. And this gentleman in particular and his wife, who worked in the same agency, knew exactly what that number was. And they said, we could have retired before, but our vision for our life is to retire on the beach. And we know that's going to require X number of dollars. So that's our number. But if you don't have the self-leadership to have that conversation and to say, here's what I want, here's who I want to be, now we're going to end up someplace. We're going to end up at some end point. But the question is it a place that you're going to want to be? And for too many people, it's not. And then they start resisting change because they're disgruntled or they're miserable, and they haven't figured out how to shift themselves from the inside out, self-leadership. And the other piece of Brett's comment that I want to mention is the resistance to change is not a one-way street. It's not just that one person has decided, I'm going to be a pain in the neck. I'm going to be the worst employee. I'm going to be grumpy and not be cooperative. Most of the time when I interact with that person, what we find out is that the people who have been around them have talked at them the same way all these years. And I don't care who you are, you can find a lever. What's the right lever to pull at what time, in what way, to get the outcome that you want, to get the shift in that difficult person that everyone's complaining about. Because why? They've been ignored or avoided for so many years. Why should I participate? Nobody asks me questions anymore. Why should I participate? No one's communicated change in an effective way. Why should I participate?
Yes.
And we blame it on the person who's shut down, and we rarely look at ourselves and say, maybe the message that I'm delivering isn't in the shape that they're able to receive. And we have to meet them where they are.
Absolutely. And I love that we have to understand it's a two-way street, as you mentioned. What we are creating, intentionally or accidentally, is that the results and outcome that we want. How this impacts me individually, and how this impact my team, and what is the outcome of overall organization. And then where we're spending our energy and efforts and resources, and how effective it is, how we're measuring, to whom we're giving to. Are we giving equal opportunity for everybody else to have a same level playing field and opportunity to truly shine and have those, as I call it, essentials, right? Because, we call it basic skills, but we're essential human skills. What it talks about what it means to be back human. And we hear so much, Joy. We've seen it, tons of titles saying, bringing back humanity in the workforce. And I always remember when people would say employee to me, even years and years ago, everybody is a talent, not employee as a number, and not just the data and title and which department they sit. But when you look at and talk about being a talent in beautiful organization, where culture is creating amazing collaboration and successes, individual and group, and creating the culture of champion, as you know, where is my forte. It's just so rewarding to see people smiling, people thriving, people going beyond and above without being asked. And what is the difference? You might be wondering. Yes, they don't have a problem with change resistance. You know what? Because they realize how a good can get so quickly. They want to preserve the good. Everybody under sun want a good. If I give you a chance and option right now, would you like to feel good or miserable? Most people will answer, I want to really feel good. The ones that are addicted to misery, they have a bigger issues to tackle. But we ultimately, every single one of us want that, don't we? And we're seeing here some amazing comments here, also that are coming from Aliga. And I really wanted to address that. How important is effective communication? So as I just scratched it on essential human skills versus how we call them basic skills or whatever it is, if they're so small and basic, everybody understand will have them. You're not born with them. You have to develop them. You have to find the ways to talk to people. And you have to find the ways to stretch yourself, to build your emotional intelligence, your emotional capacity to deal with everything that is going on with you at once at the same time. And also, what else do you need to do? You need to build your social intelligence and social capacity. Karen, so great to see you. I'm so glad you're here with us and then talking about this. Feel free to chime in, give us some questions, comments. Felipe, great to see you as well. Yes, essential skills versus soft skills. And honestly, soft skills are just a wrong rap and wrong name and wrong approach completely. I would agree in how we're going about it, don't you?
Absolutely. So there are a couple of great comments to, again, link together.
Yes.
So the Liga's comment, by the way, Liga, I may be in Costa Rica speaking at a conference this year, so we'll let you know. So in my world, over the years, starting about 20 years ago, I was visiting prisons all over the world. So I've been in Chinese prisons and Russian prisons, Poland, Spain, across the United States. And one of the questions that I asked is, wardens, what are your biggest issues? And I always expected them at the beginning of my time going into prisons, I expected them to tell me that the inmates were their biggest problems. And when I asked the staff, I expected them to say that the inmates were their biggest problems. And they all said, look, the inmates are programmed. They get up at a certain time, they go to bed at a certain time. That's not our issue. The warden's biggest issue is the staff, and the staff's biggest issue is the warden. And the same thing in the 911 sector. I've been working 911 dispatchers for the past 10 years, and every director tells me, we do not have an issue around technology and our consoles and our computer systems. Our problem is effective communication. We do not know how to talk to each other. And so what Sandeep is saying is, you know what? Self-awareness is that number one piece. It's the first piece. It's the place where we start. The 7 habits of highly effective people start off with it. The 4 pillars of emotional intelligence start off with it. It's the game changer. It's the necessary ingredient. So the question we ask ourselves is not, why is that person so angry and why are they so pissed off? The question is, what was my contribution to that argument? What did I misunderstand? What did I misinterpret? Why did I lose my temper so quickly? Right? So that changes the equation totally. It changes how we approach interpersonal communication. It changes how we approach relationships in the workplace or outside the workplace. That piece is so critical, and it begins, Sandeep, with self-awareness, because we are acting out of our narratives and our habits that we created at 3, 4, 5, 6 years old, at an age when we were terrible at interpreting the world around us. And yet we interpreted it, we created a story, and we lived through that story for so long, we don't even realize that my story is the problem. That the way I communicate my story. And by the way, let me throw in one more thing. When we talk about leadership, leaders are communicating the narrative they have inside their head unless they've reconfigured that narrative somewhere along the way.
Yes.
So look at the pattern. If you can identify and recognize patterns you had with your siblings growing up, there's a delicate point.
Yes, it is.
Are those the same patterns that you recognize in your adult life? The argument you're having today did not start today. The reaction that you're having to people around you did not start today. It started 20, 30, 40 years ago.
That is so true. And from educational standpoint, and specifically early childhood education, you're right. We're creating a lot of habits, a lot of configurations, who we are, and then and a lot of unlearning that we also need to do because we start being into very interesting conditioning. And I also love, and I'm gonna get to all of your comments, but we want to start with Erin, and Erin is asking fantastic questions. Do you think inflation, continuous increase in living costs, will start affecting employees' morale, especially as we hire and as we face new hires and everything else related to that? And Erin, I really wanted to say absolutely they will, because we always we come from culture where we always pay attention to effect and very little to the cause. And that is why we have a struggle with communication, either as individual, either as just two of us right now on the live, either as a group, right? Or as a larger group, doesn't matter do we know each other or not, because we're looking through the lens. Effect of current situation, it's a war. That war it's creating all these problems, and who is to be blamed? But we don't really look at deeply in the cause and root of the cause that everything stems. And I'm glad you asked that, because we want to segue a little bit deeper before we get to Nadal, Liga, and Sandip's questions and comments. Because we were seeing something that, unfortunately, if we step back, not to that old cliche, we should listen more than we speak, but also allowing to really understand what is the problem at hand, what are issues we're facing, and why. How can I depict that? How can I understand now cause and effect? Because effect is anger, but why does anger stem from? What can we do as employers? Can we work maybe more remotely? What kind of additional benefits we can give? How can we help with maybe raises? What targets we need to create? How volatile economy with stocks that are plummeting and going up and down and yo-yoing and everything else that is threatening our basic essential needs, right? Of course, all of that is putting people on the edge. Well, people have been for so long on the edge. Relatively, for 2 years, it's a long period of time for a lot of people, for average people. For Joe and I, not, because we build those muscles along the way. Where we've been, what we've been doing, how we were handling, it's a completely different story. But that is not the average person on the planet Earth. But what that give us? They give us huge opportunities where we're bringing that back. If employers or anybody else is not investing in you, that doesn't mean you stop investing in yourself and you stop seeking where the opportunities are, where they cherish the growth, where they cherish continuous education, where they cherish thriving culture and thriving team and solving problems instead of creating them, or frankly, sweeping them under the rug and ignoring them. So I hope that answered, Erin, and please comment below. I would love to hear more. But I also wanted to get quickly here to Nidal. Yes, that is very, very true. That a lot of people think that leaders are born, and we have some affinity and talents we're born with. But what we do, we know that phrase, and like a chicken and egg, what comes first, right? We're also seeing something here from Liga. Yes, everybody now is realizing how important it is to have a healthy working environment. Absolutely, Liga. Specifically like yourself, when you're growing and grooming future generation of young leaders in Costa Rica as an educator, spending so much time on that. And yes, he will definitely let you know, and I might be coming too, who knows? But anyway, stay safe, my friends, and enjoy beautiful Costa Rica. Make me jealous. Okay, Sandip. On the end of the all, yes. Individuals, harnessing self-awareness. You nailed it. That's really what's all about. It's ownership of yourself. Whatever you're lacking or not lacking, whatever you're capable or not capable, whatever, honest assessment, knowing where's your baseline. Comments, Joe?
Yes. Oh, do I have comments? So I love to thread pieces together and link pieces together. So think about Aaron's piece about the effect, like you were talking about the effect, essentially. We look at symptoms, we look at effects, and then we say, okay, that's coming from someplace. Well, let's also look at the comment that Liga made about effective communication. And let's also look at the comment that Sandeep made about self-awareness and self-leadership. So the one thread that, and you started talking about this, Izabela, the one thread that goes through all of this is culture. And the question is this: what is it that you're willing to tolerate? What is it that you're willing to develop and nurture inside your organization? And when do you start doing that? The best organizations that I work with, and I work with some really phenomenal places that have a lot of things figured out. They understand that the game is about culture. And when they understood that, they started taking their values, which, by the way, everybody decided together, not just one person at the top told everyone what their values were going to be. They determined their values, and their values were developed into guiding principles. The guiding principles helped develop the language that was tolerated, that was not tolerated even, celebrated, the language that was celebrated in their organization, what people were allowed to say to each other, what they could not say to each other. And the kinds of things they could not say to each other were demeaning, belittling, insulting, that kind of language, right?
Yes.
They decided that at the very beginning, and then they infused it into everything they did. They infused it into their hiring process. They infused it into their interview questions. They infused it into their policies. They infused it into their how they discipline, or at what point do they get to discipline, you know, the fifth or sixth step down the road and not the first. They worked on keeping the fabric of their organization intact, which meant they had to understand how to speak with each other, especially when the conversations became difficult. And I watched the conversations that took place in some of the workshops that I've run have been absolutely astounding.
Yes.
Because when you set ground rules and parameters, when you create structure, but allow a lot of flexibility inside that structure, and you allow people to find their own voice, and they're free to say what's on their mind, and the person on the receiving end receives it and is free to respond, and all of it's in a constructive manner, they all of a sudden find out things about each other that they never knew. It's much more difficult to be angry and pissed off with somebody that you know and somebody that you can empathize with than if you keep them at arm's length and just have all these judgments that the clique organization keep reinforcing, and that person ends up becoming almost non-human. There is no way to fix morale in an organization that doesn't have foundation and roots well identified and well articulated.
I cannot agree more, Joe. And what's so interesting too, as I said, when we know each other better, we communicate more effectively. We communicate better. We hear each other. We take away the walls, the stigma, the perception, the shield, ignorance, arrogance, anger, whatever all of that is. And when we really can hear each other, that's where you're going to communicate effectively. As you were just listening to him and seeing your comments and responses, that is really what's all about. That magic, it's right there. And this is what I'm seeing, guys, believe it or not, even in C-suite. I'm seeing this across the board. And it's so essential to foster and create that space so that others can thrive. But in order to thrive, has to be the thriving environment and container. Cannot thrive if everything is taken out, the air, the breath, the creativity, and if it's just left anger, hostility, and blame, and all of those damaging elements. Philippe, I love your question. How much value do you put on having those difficult conversations and being transparent with what is happening professionally and in the world? So we're going to get a little bit now deep into what's happening in the world and get really, really real. Joe and I are putting major events on July 10th. We partner with two amazing organizations in the US to really shed the light, to speak up and do what we preach. Take massive action and stand for something that matters. Because if we cannot show what matters, and if it's not clear, we want to be crystal clear. This is what's important. And we're going to be addressing current war in Ukraine. This is not political stand, but is something that affects every single one of us. And whoever denies it's not, it's really missing an opportunity to make a tremendous difference. So Joe, what that means on the global scale and how is this affecting every single one of us? Please share from your CIA perspective and someone who also knows so well culture of Russia and implications not only on economy and people, but culture and historic issues that we're seeing, unfortunately, going back to 300 years ago.
So yeah, let me reiterate that the perspectives that we take on that situation right now are not political in one voice of a party or whatever. Also, in terms of my background, I was a contract agent for the CIA. I lived in Russia for almost 10 years. I've been to Ukraine many times. I have friends who live there and in Russia. And I want to link all of this to the comment that was made earlier, I think it was Philippe, about communication and transparency. One of the things that we're finding between Russians and Ukrainians, I hear this a lot from my friends, and one thing that we find in international organizations and in the C-suite and in the front lines is that to a shocking extent, people do not have even the most basic vocabulary. They literally do not know the words that can be used to build bridges. They literally do not know the words to ask for forgiveness or apologize or any of these actions that will build relationships. Okay, the situation in Russia and Ukraine obviously is highly complex. How it's going to end, almost nobody knows. It's been happening for a long time. We talked earlier about finding your voice and about the freedom to be who you really are. The legacy of the Soviet Union, never mind the Russian Empire before that, the legacy of the Soviet Union was that these other independent cultures became part of what was called a prison of nations. They were essentially held captive and forbidden to the people, the citizens of these countries, Russia and Ukraine alike, and all the others that were part of the Soviet Union, were forbidden to actively and freely express themselves. They were forbidden to actively and freely travel and cross borders. They do not actually know a lot about the outside world. They do from their own perspective, but there are unbelievable, deep and profound misunderstandings about how the world functions and about how the West is. So what we see is a very complicated dynamic of various elements, including fear, a massive amount of fear, yes, on the level of the top government in Russia, on the level of the existence of Russia and the Soviet Union. The driving force was fear. How do you create any healthy entity? I don't care if you call it a country or a family or an organization or a Fortune 500 company that is based on the foundation of fear, where people are not permitted to express themselves. What's happening now is the ongoing unraveling of the Soviet Union and the different perspectives of let's just take two different people, right? Putin and Zelensky, without diving into all the details of politics. Putin has this image of reconstituting not the Soviet Union, but the glory of the Russian Empire. And Zelensky has this sense of freedom and democracy and trying to define Ukraine as a separate and independent entity. This morning, the Star Wars popped in my head. And, you know, all of those different good versus evil, obviously not that simple. But the fact of the matter is, our actions are going to be driven by our perspective and what's in our head. So yes, if you go back to Sandeep's comments about self-awareness and how you see the world. One question that we can ask is, what do you see with? And when I ask those questions in my workshops, participants say, I see with my eyes. And we do not see with our eyes. We see through our eyes. We see with our brains. We see with our history, our experience, our pain, our suffering, our joy, our happiness. And the question is, which one are we focused on? Historically, unfortunately, Russia is a place that's focused on hierarchical, not servant leadership. The population has never been the priority for Russia, Russian Empire, Soviet Union. And for all the faults and flaws that Ukraine has, one of the big things that you see that they've been trying to do is to try to establish something that's different than the path that they've had before. Thomas Jefferson said, in order to have something you've never had, you have to do something you've never done. Everything that I just said applies to Russia, Ukraine, and your organization. These are about people issues, first and foremost. And this event that Izabela and I are involved in on July 10th is a people-focused event, because the thing that we are missing are things like empathy, sympathy, forgiveness, and compassion.
Yes.
If we don't stop to develop the effective communication that's been talked about in the comments, then what are the chances, if we keep staking out our territory to make sure we get what we want and that everyone understands what we want and we force it to what we want, what are the chances of being able to develop that dialogue? The chances to be able to develop the understanding that's needed to solve problems. To me, that's the underlying issue in this whole Russian-Ukraine thing that ripples throughout the entire world, and it's impacting all of us, and it will continue to impact all of us. If you say that Ukraine is over there, and it's a place with all kinds of cities and people whose names I can't pronounce, and it has nothing to do with me, then we missed the boat.
Yes.
George is an awesome point.
Yes.
Psychologically safe place to be able to question and speak up to leadership. And the problem with leadership at all levels is that they do not create safety for their employees because they themselves are afraid. They're afraid of losing power. They're afraid of not being, by the way, they're not afraid of not being infallible. I hear this from CEOs all the time. I think my people expect me to have all the answers. Your people don't expect you to have all the answers. My people expect me to be infallible. Your people don't expect you to be infallible. Those are your fears. And to create that safe place requires communication. And when you don't have the words to communicate, all kinds of things happen, from lack of morale to war. These are the drivers behind all of these things we're seeing.
Excellent point, and I'm glad how you beautifully connected the dots. And I wanted to go back to Aaron's question. And Aaron, thank you for saying that. And you're right, it's so very important to have a servant leadership more than ever, and really with true, genuine servitude, with no expectation of anything back, and then really demonstrating culture, which servant leadership also brings the heart in the center of the organization. If we put more heart in center of organization, everything clicks, takes away all the other stuff that Joe was just talking about, takes away the fears, takes away its conflicts, takes away its insecurities, because normalizes. And also what creates acceptance. That you, every single one, you are enough, that you have automatic respect, that you are all included and seemed and deemed valuable. But when we don't have that, when we don't have a servant leadership, when we don't have a genuine interest to support others and extend our hand and really check in and see how we're all doing and what is going on and where we can extend our help and who needs the help the most, which department is struggling, which managing director is not delivering on their numbers or their projects or whatever might be the case. Who is being sick and affected and also needs the extra help and picking up the slack, not just to say, oh, I was working on all of his project, but who really stepped in. It's not about instant gratification and instant rewards. It's about just knowing that you're doing things because it's not only that is the right thing to do, but you feel compelled. What we need is more not being in our head and intellectualize and process every single element. But we need to be more in our heart and soul and understand how people and human nature work, because technology is amazing. Look at us. We're having global conversation on Saturday morning around amazing topics that we need to have. All of you are showing up, which I'm tremendously grateful, from Uptip to Joy to Felipe to Aaron to Dan. Dan, great to see you, sweetheart. To everyone else that showed up. And I can't say enough for Liga, Sandip, and Nadal, as well, others that are here with us. People from Algeria that have a good Wi-Fi and opportunity to use their smartphones because they want to learn. Brett, Aham, and Kunyan, Rahab, I just want to say I kudo you. Yvonne, Chris, Mohammed, because we could have spent a million different ways and just shows the world is craving connection, creating genuine conversation, honesty, transparency, and great leadership. You demonstrate phenomenal leadership this morning. And first of all, before I go on, I wanted just to say I kudo you for showing up and asking questions, participating, but in the same time, being that bold, taking initiative, because it takes a lot of guts to do something, open, public, real. But that's what we need more of. Because if we know what we stand, it's easier than to know where should we go, who should we follow, who should we engage with, which part of the groups we want to be connected to. It's not just to feel instantaneously good, but also, as you guys know, leadership is something not only that I'm passionate about, but also recognized as a subject matter expert. But ironically, legacy leadership that became, in the last few years, a huge buzzword, is the crown jewel of all leadership. Servant leadership is huge. It's as they say, left hand of it. Because you can't be a legacy leader without servant heart. Every single amazing legend and legacy leader had insanely amazing servant heart. So Aaron, you speak to me in so many levels, and thank you for asking the question. Anybody else, please don't hesitate. But I want to get back to Joe, because we have to look at what are the key ingredients to make a magic happen. And what is the magic when I create champion cultures? I don't create myself, but I give all ingredients needed and creating containers to make it happen. And guess what? Everybody then flourished and everybody feels so amazingly empowered, and they unleash all of their skills and knowledge and things they never thought they even had in them. Why can't we do that? What is stopping us? Please. And we're also having here a great comment by a question, but Sakyu, how we be safe from bad leaders of the world's conflict and weaknesses? Okay, and Sarah, bad leaders take us to conflicts. Yes, you're right. Bad leaders take us to conflicts. It's easier to get on that level, right? Conflict is the lowest way because you don't have to think. It's the easiest way to quickly brush off someone, push someone away. It's easy to be territorial. It's easy to take and move on without ever thinking consciously what just happened. What my actions and implications of my actions are doing, not only for that person or for that group of people or for that company or frankly for that community and frankly for that country.
So I would like to tell you about one individual I met. I worked in the Organized Crime Control Department of the Soviet Police in 1990-91. My supervisor was a general in the Soviet Police. He was the deputy head of the organized crime control for the entire country. I had an office across the hall from his. He invited me to come into his office anytime I want. And I sat for a year and I watched him. I spent time with him at his home. I knew his wife and his kids. I traveled with him. We did all kinds of things together. He became a kind of surrogate father for me. The comment about heart and soul can be easily dismissed, especially by cynical people. But if this man, this general, this commando, this Robert De Niro, cop's cop and man's man, in the Soviet Union at the time of collapse, can put heart and soul at the core of everything he did, then it's good enough for the rest of us. His basic mode of operation was fundamental respect, to the point where people around the world in law enforcement circles knew him. They knew him because they respected him. I watched his political supporters inside the Ministry of Internal Affairs. They respected him. I watched his political enemies. They respected him. I watched as we sat in a restaurant one day and a Russian gangster walked in, and it was a scene right out of a movie where we had the big bodyguards and the buxom blonde and the jewels and the fur coats and all the rest of it. And the gangster's eyes connected with Gennadi's eyes. And they looked at each other and they just nodded. Gennady was a man, passed away unfortunately, who did everything that he did based on just a couple of ingredients. One, he had heart and soul at the core of everything he did. Number two, he respected himself, the people around him, the people who worked with him, and the people he arrested. He said, look, I can go out back and beat up a suspect. But why would I do that? They're already being humiliated by being arrested. They already have other issues in their lives. Why should I do that? To the point where he was recognized at the top levels of the Soviet government as the man to call on for hostage negotiation and for kidnap situations, because they understood what he was about. The next point is he was great at his job. He was great. He understood the environment he was working in. He had massive skill set. He was the head of the criminal investigation department for the whole Republic of Turkmenistan during the Soviet period at the age of 33. He worked on sharpening his saw constantly. And the last point I'll make about this is he listened. He listened in, this is a weird combination of words, but he listened voraciously. He did not react. I never saw him react, because he knew very clearly that when you react, you lose the clarity of your mind. When the situation is difficult or even dire, the thing that's called upon is for clarity of mind and for you to understand what are the resources you have to marshal to resolve this situation. You cannot do it in a panic. And to watch that for a year, after being 20, I was 22, 23 years old, and to see him personify the philosophical ideals of a leader, like commitment and honesty and loyalty, was a life-changing experience for me.
Thank you for sharing this powerful story and connecting, and also showing what it takes to be good leader and being accountable for your action, which I also want to make sure that I answer Sakio's question. And you're right now it's so much going on, and we'll tie to Sandip's question too. How do we protect ourselves from bad leaders, specifically around the world, and specific conflicts that we're seeing right now? And that should be something that we called people accountable right away before things escalate and get to this magnitude, and sadly, unfortunately, to the war, as we're seeing these conflicts happening right now. Sometimes we are not willing to make a necessary change. Let go of the poor client, or client that is not serving just our immediate needs, but overall, how is affecting, what's implication of the client on the rest of people globally. Sometimes we also have to learn how to say no. And then also who we continue to partner with, and who are our strategic partners in the process. When we see need for change, when we see red flags and symptoms, we need to adjust. Our unwillingness to ignore it, that is what gets us in trouble. And for you, it's the best is to gravitate towards people that are not bad leaders, and they're not creating confusion and crisis, the ones that you feel compelled to gravitate towards and identify with based on your values and based what's important to you as well. So when we do that, and when we collectively say we are not accepting this behavior, guys, how would you think how many Fortune 500 CEOs before, right on the cusp, before COVID started on end of 2019, were actually let go? Some of them are being given opportunity to resign, but most of them actually were asked to resign, and some of them are being literally let go. Because not only just board of directors making choices, decisions, and it's not just because of the performance, did we make the money or not, but how did we make the money? How do we look at in terms of our brand and our reputation, and in terms of our ethics? Did we act on an ethical level or not? And what we thought we can get away with, and what kind of shots we were calling. So when we stop doing those things that are detrimental, and a moment it looks like a smart move or quick fix, and we stop really looking fundamentally on a great solutions and foundation, then we're not going to run to these issues they're seeing. And Sandeep, I love, again, bringing back servant leadership. I really think a holistic approach, you're spot on, is very, very important. And I remember, Sandeep, the story I just quickly want to share. I moved from Europe here in the United States, and consciously, purposely, I selected Colorado. Boulder, Colorado, it's not far away from Denver. And I remember going to Naropa University for first time, very much so a spirit, mind, and body university, and receiving some of the interns, part of us nonprofit that I was running at the time, and programs that were a part of it. And I remember when we were using a holistic approach, even that mindset, let alone language, was totally disregarded 20 years ago. People felt like that is just something that is either spiritual or religious, and it's no room and place, and doesn't have nothing to do with the business. And how wrong we are. Because we are not just the bodies and the title. And as a result, for organizations that are still operating with that outdated and horribly fear-based containers and environments, are losing, as a result, not only opportunities for growth, but also truly great people. And again, this is all about you, all of you who came this morning to participate. So I cannot share enough how important it is, yes, to show that vulnerability. How also it's important to have the courage and lead with the courage, and on being open-minded, because what worst thing is to happen? Maybe you're not going to get results, or you don't even know what results you're going to get, or whatever might be the case, but at least you will be closer for the outcome you're seeking. Because you tested something, you tried something different, and you tried something new. So I just really wanted to say we're getting on top of the hour. We can go on, and I know it's a Saturday morning for all of you. So I just want to say how deeply both Joe and I are grateful to have all of you participate. And the best part, we're doing this 3 times a week next week, in the next 4 or 5 weeks leading up to the event, but also post-event that we're talking about, which I will put a link in a comment so you can see, and how you can contribute and do the right thing, how you can be part of something that you believe in and you want it to your voice, your representation, to be accurately painted a picture in the times of greatest needs of humanity, and of course, all of us individually, right? Because honestly, it's so rewarding to be part of something that you know not only that is the right thing to do, but you also know that however big or small effort it is that you can do, it's going to make tremendous impact on others. So with closing remarks, I will pass to George for a quick comment before we highlight every single one of you participating this morning. Joe.
Well, I would just like to say that Sandeep is on a roll today. So thank you so much for your comments and your questions, as well as those of everyone else. One very quick comment about courage. The reason I wanted to bring up Zelensky today was for that reason, actually, Sandeep. The thing that's astounding to me, agree with him, don't agree with him, his politics, whatever. The thing that was astounding to me that I've found myself thinking many times since the war began is, what would I do if I were in his shoes? Would I have the courage to stand? Would I turn and go? And think about two things. One, the power that it gave to his people, the impact that it created for their morale. And secondly, we don't have to be put in that position. The question is this: what does your leadership look like right now? What does your courage look like right now in your situations, in your organizations? What have you been kicking down the road? What have you swept under the carpet? We all do it. What have we been procrastinating about? What have we dodged? What have we passed on to other people because we got freaked out by having to face it ourselves? That's daily courage. The courage to face difficult things and the courage to find your own voice, to be your real self and inspire people around you. That's what courage of vulnerability is about.
That is so beautiful and such a great close for today. Again, we're super thrilled. This is our first one, many more to come. We look forward to seeing you on Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday this coming week. Different topics, but same hosts with a lot of really powerful, obviously, interaction and conversation. So Sandeep, pleasure. Seiku, pleasure to meet you. Ampita, pleasure to having you with us. Joe, a great comment. Felipe, likewise, such a great interaction and great comments. Aaron, you are amazing. Thank you for bringing all those great questions, and we look forward to continuous collaboration and participation. Dan, great to see you. I hope your twin girls are doing fantastic, and we need to catch up, my friend. Liga, it's great to have you again with us. We also have Nidal, which we're super thrilled that he could be able to join us. And then we're having Karen, and we're having Brett. And I hope that we still have a Kumar with us, Alham, and everybody else. So without further ado, just want to wish you a phenomenal weekend. And let's continue the dialogue in these conversations, my friends. And stay safe and well. Cheers.